Check.
And we are live. It is September 18th, 2025. How you doing, John?
Doing good, Jack. How are
Awesome.
you?
Good, good. I am good. This episode is called Debasement. John, what exactly is debasement?
Oh, long story short, when they would add base metals to the gold coins, so they could have more coins.
Proto. Proto money.
So proto money would be like seashells, glass beads, and salt. And debasement generally refers to an increase in the supply of the money itself, which generally leads to a increase in prices of things that you buy with that money. And another way of saying that is an increase in the supply of money leads to the decrease in the purchasing power of that money. So we can look at seashells. Whenever a primitive economy used seashells as money, when Europeans came with fancy boats and ways to manufacture seashells as quickly, much more quickly than by hand, the way then those economies would get wrecked. Those people would everything that they used to buy with seashells became more and more expensive for them, and the goods and services that were worth money were all sold off to the Europeans who had all the seashells. And same thing happened with glass beads in Africa. It was difficult to make glass beads in Africa. The supply increase of glass beads was slow because it was difficult to make glass beads, and glass beads worked fine as money. But then when Europeans came in and they could mass produce glass beads in factories in Europe and then bring them on giant ships, bring 1 million beads a day, the African economies got wrecked, where everything became more and more expensive for the Africans to buy with their glass beads. There was more and more glass beads, and everything of value was sold to the Europeans because the Europeans could just buy whatever they wanted with unlimited glass beads and salt. You may have heard, Jack. What's the phrase about soldiers and salt?
Uh, a man is the well,
Worth
referring to a
salt,
soldier would be, is the man worth his weight in salt?
right? And so, as a good soldier is worth his salt, and soldiers don't necessarily want to be paid in salt to kill and be killed for salt when they can just take their clay pots and go down to the seashore and fill them up with ocean water and set them out in the sun on the beach and wait a day, and then they got a bunch of salt. They don't need to kill people for
Very
salt.
easy to debase salt.
Yes, then and then everyone's lugging around 50 pounds of salt to buy a loaf of bread, and nobody can use all this extra salt, right? So yeah, as the supply of salt increases, as it naturally will if you use it as money, because then people hurry up down to the seashore and make more salt. Then the prices of everything priced in salt will go up, and it takes more and more salt to buy things, and the purchasing power of the salt goes down. Um,
Yeah, which was already easily done because, like you said, nobody wanted to be. The soldiers were typically paid in salt when they were not able to be paid in the preferred method, which is metals.
Metals, yep, so copper, silver, and gold. And gold has always been more valuable than silver, and silver has always been more valuable than copper. And why is that? Well, copper comes out of the ground faster. I don't remember the rate, but silver comes out of the ground at 5% per year. Gold comes out of the ground between 1 and 2% per year. And it used to be 10 ounces of silver for an ounce of gold. And then around the time of the dollar being created, it was 20 ounces of silver for an ounce of gold. A dollar was a silver dollar, was an ounce of silver. And a $20 bill was a receipt for an ounce of gold, and it was 20 ounces of silver to $1. Now, um, I'd have to do a little math. I don't know what the exchange rate is now, but it's over 100 ounce. I think silver is pushing $20 or $30 an ounce. So it's about 100. It's about 100 ounces of silver to an ounce of gold now. And people think, oh, I'll just buy silver and it'll revert back to silver is going to go up in price and reach 1/10 that of gold. Gold is $3,600 an ounce right now. So maybe silver will become $360 an ounce next year. Nope, not going to happen because there's 100 times more silver than there was before because it comes out of the ground faster. And so as you increase the supply of copper, copper price goes down. is you decrease the supply of copper by making pipes out of it in people's houses. The price of copper goes up, but then you can open up new copper mines and decrease the price of copper again. And the same with silver. It comes out of the ground at 5% per year. The purchasing power of that silver will not match the purchasing power of the gold. The purchasing power of the silver will go down over time, whereas the purchasing power of the gold will hold more steady over time. And is why gold kind of became the ultimate money over time, because it's the hardest money to increase the supply of. It's expensive to dig gold out of the ground. It's expensive once it's dug out of the
To
ground to
find it. Well,
to
you got to find it. You got to pay. I mean, it's not
find it.
it's less common, so it's harder to find, right?
Yep,
So
yep,
it's hard. I think that that might even be where the term hardness of the money comes from,
yep,
is how hard and difficult it is to procure it.
yep. That's exactly what it's from. And then from metals, paper was invented because
Well, hold
metals.
on, real quick. Before we move on, I wanted to mention with metals that back in the time when it was used as money, they would debase this currency by clipping the coins, and that was done by scraping the edges, that were all usually smooth in the beginning, and then they tried to do, take countermeasures on putting like lines vertically on the edges of the coins to prevent them from being scraped. But there was, people would do other things, and so, once the government realized that people were clipping these coins to save a little bit of that money, they realized that they had to put a stop to it, and the best way that they knew how to do it was to start debasing the currency themselves and show all these people how they really do it. So they started doing stuff like, mixing in a base metal, something that was a lot more common, like zinc or iron or nickel or copper or whatever. They would mix it in with the gold or the silver, and that what it would do is it would make more of this alloy than there
More
was
coins.
of just silver. They could then mint that alloy into more coins, and then they would fill their coffers with these coins, and then they would have all the money that they needed to spend on war or famine or whatever the case may be. That's how they could earn a little bit of money without taxing their citizens anymore and causing a rebellion. And so, anyways, that's how humans debased, metal money. So we
Yep.
created a new system with accounts and ledgers and paper money that was, you know, we thought going to be better than that old method. Certainly lighter weight and easy to transport. However, it came with its own flaws, and all that you get into paper money. Sorry for
No,
dominating the convo.
you're, we're doing good here. Yes, paper money came along. I think China was the first country to have paper. China was in the silver standard, and then paper was invented. And this is before the printing press. They just manually made paper money. And sure enough, people would deposit their silver into the bank and then receive paper money representing that silver. And the banks would create more paper than they had silver, and all the same problems. And the prices of goods and services went up because there's more paper money, and then eventually the whole system would collapse back down into and then people would use the actual silver again until a new trustworthy bank arrived that would not increase the supply of paper beyond the supply of silver until it did. Another 10 or 20 years later, when the old man died and his son took over, and the son, you know, he would do it, whatever. Like, it's just a matter of time.
Right.
Um, it's just a matter of time, and it's been like that for every paper money. It's always been just a matter of time until the supply of that paper was increased and the purchasing power of that paper decreased. And
Well, how do we do it now then? Now that we've got this fancy
well,
economy and.
now we have computers. So
Mm-hmm.
now beyond paper is digital money, and the dollar is digital now. Make no mistake about it. It costs 6 cents to make a new penny. They don't print pennies. And that's even with the pennies used to be copper, and then they debased it to be zinc and other metals. And now even with the cheap metals, even with the base metals, it's still too expensive to make pennies. No, they make dollars in computers now, and the increase of dollar and the dollars are increasing, and you can see it. The way I measure it is the national debt. As the national debt goes up, that's the supply of dollars, because the national debt is is in treasury bills, and those treasury bills are held by banks, and specials for banking and all that. But that's the base of the dollar supply is the treasury bills, and so there's a lot of details on how that works. It's complicated on purpose. But basically the supply of dollars is going up. Therefore, the purchasing power of those dollars is going down. Another way to say that is the supply of dollars is going up. Therefore, the prices of things that you can purchase is also going up.
Yeah, because the demand for those dollars stays the same. Now,
Yeah.
if the demand were to also go up for those dollars, well, then the price would, or the purchasing power, I should say, would also hold steady, with the supply increase rather than going up. But that's
Which
just,
we've been doing that with oil and other things. We've been
yeah.
trying to do that, but the cat's out of the bag. Other countries are starting to realize, namely China, Japan, Russia, India. Other countries are realizing, Saudi Arabia, that they don't want to hold on to our treasury bills anymore because we've been printing too many dollars and printing too many treasury bills, and they want to hold gold again. They want to go back to gold. They're buying gold. That's why the price of gold is going up,
Well,
because there's more
yeah.
dollars. There's the same amount of gold, but there's more dollars. So the price of gold is going up. And it's not that gold is more valuable. Gold has the same value. Gold is unchanged. What's changed is the supply of the dollars. There is more dollars, but the same gold. Therefore, the gold price goes up in dollars. Because the purchasing power of the dollars has gone down. And so now we're looking at crypto. Oh, I want to also mention in paper is stocks. Companies can issue shares of stock that represent ownership in the company. If there's 100 shares of stock of the company, each share is worth 1% of the company. Well, what happens if they dilute the shares and they print more shares? What if they kick out another 900 shares? Now there's 1,000 shares, and you had originally bought 1% of the company and received one share. Now they dilute the shares. They make 10 times the amount of shares. Now there's 1,000 shares. You still only have one, but 1,000 shares have now been sold into the market. Now you only own, instead of 1% of the company, now you only own 0.1% of the company. That's called share dilution, which is different from a stock split, but we're not going to get into that right now. But so
Because we're talking
paper,
about debasement, and this is how
yep,
stocks are debased.
this is how stocks are debased. Any company that loses money only has two options because they got to pay their employees. They can either take on debt to pay their employees, or they can dilute the shares. And usually they dilute the shares because they don't have to pay that back. They just dilute the shares left and right as fast as they can, and that's why these
Thank you, shareholders.
yeah. So if you're holding a stock and their stock is being debased by more stock through the dilution of more shares of stock being created out of thin air, you're losing your purchasing power. Your value of your stock is going to go down as the supply of stock goes up, because it's still one company. Now, if there's, was 100 shares, now there's 1,000 shares. If the company is worth the same total, then each share is probably going to go down in value by 10 times as well. Because same thing as anything else. If you increase the supply of the stocks or the paper money or the glass beads, or if you increase the supply, the value of each unit goes down. Same with the dollar. As the government increases the supply of dollars, the value of each dollar goes down in every other term. And
Yeah,
a
like
dollar is a
compared to
dollar.
whatever you need to purchase
But if
with
you want
it.
to buy eggs, now it's more dollars. If you want to buy gold, it's more dollars. If you want to buy a car, it's more dollars. If you want to buy fruit, it's more dollars. If you want to get a roof on your house, it's more dollars. If you want to get a house, it's more dollars. Like, you name it. Want to buy some shoes, it's more dollars.
Because there's a greater supply of those dollars.
Some,
It's the same, it's more dollars chasing the exact same amount of goods and services that are out
yes,
there.
but sometimes shoes are cheaper. Sometimes gas prices stay the same, even though the prices of everything else are going up. Why is that? Well, it's because America is increasing the supply of gasoline. America has become the largest producer of fossil fuels on the planet in the last few years. And maybe there's some factory in Asia where they're kicking out 100 million new pairs of shoes every year. Well, then the price of those shoes might go down because there's a higher supply. But we're talking about the money, right? So now we have digital money. The digital money is crypto, and so the only money that's really not been debased and has held its value is gold.
And it has been debased. We've discussed covered how it has been debased,
Right.
but
By
you're talking about the
coppers, but not
entirety of
gold
it.
anymore.
You're talking
And
about the entirety of gold, though.
yeah, just gold itself, pure gold. Pure gold has held its value. Debased gold that's been had copper added to it or other metals, it loses its value. The dollar, which was a receipt for gold, that loses its value, right? And it loses its value in gold terms too, because there's more dollars. There's the same amount of gold in Fort Knox, but there's constantly more dollars being printed, even though there's the same amount of gold in Fort Knox. So the dollars for an ounce of gold has gone up in the last 55 years since 1970. The amount of U.S. debt has gone up 100 times. It's 100 times larger. 37 trillion. It used to be 0.37 trillion. Now it's 37 trillion. There's 100 times more treasury bills. Well, the gold is now $3,500 an ounce. It used to be $35 an ounce. That's gone up 100 times. S&P 500, a share of S&P 500 is now $4,000. Used to be $40 back in 1970. Went up 100 times. There's 100 times more dollars. Therefore, the price of gold is 100 times more expensive. The price of the S&P 500 is 100 times more expensive. The S&P 500 is still 500 companies. Gold is still gold. Those didn't change. The value of gold did not go up 100x. The purchasing power of the dollar went down 100x is what happened. And so now we have Bitcoin, which gold has held its value for 5,000 years. Bitcoin's managed to hold its value for 16 years so far, might continue longer. And it's because it's very difficult to make new Bitcoin.
Well,
You can't
yeah.
just you can't just turn on your computer and create more Bitcoin. You can create meme coins on with pump.fun on Solana, but you can't create more Solana tokens that way. You can if you run a validator, but that has its own costs, right? Um, if you run a Solana validator, or you can make more Bitcoin if you run a Bitcoin miner, which has costs. It's $5,000 or $10,000 for the mining machine itself. Then you got to pay for the electricity.
But I mean that's more of an inflation of supply than it is a debasement issue, right? You're not debasing the currency when you mine it, right?
And
You
you
inflate the
are
cur
Jack. This is perfect because debasement of a currency and increase in supply of currency is the exact same thing. They're different
Well,
words for the exact same thing.
so I would argue that not in the case of cryptocurrency. And the reason I would say that is because the protocol has already been programmed. There
Yes,
are only a certain number of these coins
21 million Bitcoin.
that will ever exist. It's different for
Yeah.
each cryptocurrency. It's 21
Yes.
million for Bitcoin.
Yes.
And so, and you know, you'll hear if you stick around in crypto long enough, you're going to hear all sorts of arguments about the number of Bitcoin. But the point of it is that even though they're not all in circulation, there is a fixed number of them that will ever exist. Period. Full stop.
I think there's 19.9 million Bitcoin in circulation now, and the inflation rate of Bitcoin is now less than gold. It's about 1% now.
And so I would say that when new Bitcoin enters the market, it's not a debasement of the currency. It's just an increase in the supply, but it's a no like it's an increase of the circulating supply, not even the supply.
Well, yes, that's true. Um, Debasement is usually a drastic increase in supply, whereas gold has been proven to work as money. And as far as a store of value money, it's harder to use as a medium of exchange of money. Gold is, but it is pretty good as a store of value form of money because of its low supply rate increase of less than 2% per year, which is also why Bitcoin so far is a good store of value because it has less than 2% inflation now, 1% and actually every 4 years the inflation rate of Bitcoin gets cut in half. So it's 1% now. It'll be 0.5% per year in 2028, and a lot of cryptos have higher inflation rates than Bitcoin. And a lot of cryptos are changeable. Bitcoin, you cannot change the inflation rate of Bitcoin. Is why it's considered a hard store of value, is because it is not changeable. The inflation rate is not changeable. Whereas some other cryptos, the inflation rate is changeable and has changed, such as Ethereum and Solana. They, in fact, Solana just tried to change. They tried to lower the inflation rate, but it's decentralized. It's getting into the weeds. Long
But
story
yeah, well,
short,
that's why I argue that when it comes to crypto, you're actually not debasing, right? There is no way to actually debase cryptocurrency. Not in the
not Bitcoin.
not in yeah, right, exactly, not Bitcoin, and
Well,
not
there's
any
a
of the
debasement
not
schedule.
in,
There's a fixed debasement schedule of Bitcoin.
again, I don't think of the debasement means taking something that was
Changing it,
whole and
changing.
pure and reducing
You're
it
right.
in value, and you're not doing that when you create more when this new Bitcoin enters circulation. Like it's not,
You're right. When you say it that way, Jack, you're absolutely right.
and
You
so
cannot change the Bitcoin is resistant or totally immutable to change in its inflation rate in its supply into its the supply schedule is fixed
right.
and it is not changeable, which is why it can't. If you say debasement means changing the supply or changing the schedule of the supply, um, you're right. Bitcoin cannot be debased.
I mean, yeah, and I guess yeah, and we're splitting hairs at that point. Like you said, we're in the
Yes.
weeds and we're splitting hairs. But I guess when we get to this level and when we get to what Bitcoin has actually achieved, like,
And that's why it's kind of cool, right? Because
well,
before all we had was gold. That was the best humanity could come up with for 5,000 years on what to use as a money that cannot be debased so easily, that cannot be the supply. What can we use as money that cannot be increased in supply? Like everything we have, we can increase the supply of, even gold, slowly. But that's why gold wins, is because it's the slowest of all the things that we can use as money. Gold is the most difficult to increase the supply of and holds its value the best because of that. But then this new invention of Bitcoin came around in 2009, which is even harder to increase the supply of than gold. In fact, the supply of Bitcoin is set in stone in computers that is decentralized and can't be changed. And that's what makes Bitcoin a new thing that didn't exist before.
yeah, I mean the 21 million is hard coded, so
Yeah.
it's not like even if everybody agree, like even if all the developers and the miners and the users and everyone agreed to like let's create another 10 million Bitcoin, you can't do it.
And I would like to differentiate between Bitcoin and crypto, right? Just the same as you would differentiate between gold and other metals. Every other metal is easier to make than gold. Just as you would differentiate between glass beads and gold, right? It's a lot easier. Just because a crypto is a crypto doesn't mean it's going to hold its value like Bitcoin. People think that any crypto could become as valuable as Bitcoin, and it's not true. The reason Bitcoin is valuable is because of its proof of work and protocol, immutable protocol. Whereas a lot of these other cryptos are proof of stake, which is different, and some of them aren't even blockchains. They're just tokens that usually exist on another blockchain. Most cryptos are tokens that exist on Ethereum or Solana, aren't even their own chain. Um, and so it's important to realize that Bitcoin is special because of the way it's programmed. Whereas a lot of these other cryptos, even if the other crypto is programmed well, that program can be changeable. If the program is changeable, that money's not hard anymore, no matter what the inflation rate is. Ethereum likes to pretend that they're
Ultrasound.
harder money than Bitcoin, a better store of value than Bitcoin, because Ethereum has a lower inflation rate than Bitcoin. And it's true, Ethereum does have a lower inflation rate than Bitcoin right now. And there's other cryptos even that have even a lower inflation rate than there's cryptos that have negative inflation rates, but they're not set in stone. Those
The well,
protocols are
and the
changeable.
total supply not in circulation is still significantly greater. Right. So even though there's maybe
Even if it is,
maybe
even
yeah,
because
maybe
there
there's
are cryptos, there's
deflation.
tons of cryptos. And some of them, the supply is 100% in existence. There are cryptos where 100% of the supply is in existence, and there's no inflation. Why is that crypto not more valuable than Bitcoin? Because a person could change that supply, whereas a person cannot change the Bitcoin supply.
So one
That's
is
the difference.
debasable and one is not.
Yes. Couldn't have said it better myself.
And with that, we are at time. So thank you guys all so much for tuning in. If you like the video, please like the video. If you enjoy the content, please consider subscribing. And if you ping the notification bell, you will get a notification when we go live next time. John, you got anything else before we sign off?
When you increase the supply of a money, no matter what that money is, if it's dollars, euros, Turkish lira, gold, glass beads, Bitcoin, Solana, Ethereum, salt, uh, seashells, it doesn't matter what the money is. If you increase the amount of that money, then the purchasing power of that money goes down, and the prices denominated of products denominated in that money go up. Period.
Buy Bitcoin.